mean, AI is such a great example because people look and say, oh, it's just improving so fast. Look at all these new products that are coming out. They're all over the place. Yeah, but just because lots of new products come out doesn't mean they're getting better. I mean, the one area where I would see AI getting better is that the video quality, right? You say generative AI, look, the video quality is getting better. But if you look at the important measures of performance, and by the way, I'm much more optimistic about generative AI for making advertisements, science fiction portions of movies, particularly science fiction movies where truth isn't so important, where you can have hallucinations. But you get outside some of these applications, hallucinations are important. What is the frequency of hallucinations? Is it going down? Well, not really. This is one of the key measures of performance. So if you're trying to judge about a technology and whether it's going to really succeed, one of the key factors is it getting better? Figure out what the customer really wants.
This is the Future Ready Advisor, a show about transforming your financial advisory practice. I'm your host, Sam Sivarajan, a wealth management consultant, behavioral scientist, and keynote speaker. In this podcast, I dive deep into the real challenges advisors face and bring you insightful conversations with top industry experts. Together, we'll explore practical strategies grounded in behavioral science to help you better serve your clients, optimize your time, and build a future-ready practice. Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Sam Sivarajan. Welcome to today's episode of the Future Ready Advisor. Today, I'm here with Dr. Jeffrey Funk, a technologist and leading voice in the world of AI. Dr. Funk, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Delighted. I think this is a very timely conversation about AI and technology with everything that's going on in the markets and in the world. Let me quickly introduce you to the audience. Dr. Jeffrey Funk is a leading expert on the economics of innovation, with over 40 years of experience studying how technology impacts industries and economies. His work has been featured in Fast Company, Slate, and Quartz, where he offers clear-eyed analysis on the real-world implications of AI, blockchain, and other emerging technologies. Dr. Funk has advised corporations and governments, helping them navigate technological change with a focus on creating sustainable value. His insights are invaluable for anyone looking to cut through the hype and understand what truly drives innovation. And I think that's a great place to dive in. I think there's, and I've seen a lot of your commentary about some of the hype that we're seeing in the marketplace. Maybe before we dive into that part of the conversation, you've had a long, distinguished career analyzing the economics of innovation and technological advancements. I think just for our audience, could you share some of the key milestones in your journey that led you to focus on the intersection of technology and the economic impact?
Well, I've been interested in science and technology my whole life. I mean, I remember watching the landing on the moon in 1969. I was 13 years old, and wow, I thought physics was going to be the source of everything for the next, 50, 100 years. And I thought we were not just going to be going to the moon, but other planets in the solar system, other solar systems. I was a big avid reader of science fiction. I ended up majoring in physics, and then I went to work for a semiconductor factory. Then went back to graduate school to get my PhD in engineering. And probably I was one of those people who was always looking for the next big thing. So I was always trying to see what was going to be big. So the semiconductors weren't big enough for me, even though that was a huge market. It was a great field to be in, but I kept looking elsewhere. I got very interested in Japan in the 1980s after I got my PhD, went to Japan, spent a lot of time trying to understand Japan because I was one of those that mistakenly believed that, Japan was going to take over the world in the 1980s. And so I had all these different roads I went down. And gradually I began to realize that I needed a heck of a lot more common sense and a lot less emotion when I was dealing with these technology and things. This a lot of what I'm doing today is because I realized early in my life that I needed to learn this in order to make better decisions. Because it's not just about, well, what are you going to do for your company? What technology are you going to introduce? How much money are you going to spend on? It's your life. What career are you going to choose? You have to be careful about jumping on the next big thing, because sometimes that big thing isn't as big as
Hmm.
people think it was. And then in 2007, I left Japan and came to Singapore, where I was teaching at National University of Singapore. And I taught a course in economics of new technology. I dealt with almost all these new technologies, and still I was a big optimist. I knew that most of the progress was in electronics, but I could see things happening in nanotechnology and superconductors and uh, bioelectronics at the Toronto Sky. And I could see all these things happening. But after a few years of teaching the course, I'm updating the slides on these technologies every semester, actually. And I realized that some of the technologies aren't getting better. So I was being exposed to lots of different technologies because I would incorporate their ideas into the next semester's class and
Hmm.
into these technologies and the status of them. And gradually, by 2014, I was becoming a pessimist because I could see that things weren't happening like people have been talking about. And I still see that today. I still see people talking about some new technology. And I say, that was in my slides 10 years ago. And it's only a little better than what I saw 10 years ago, right? And this is perspective you have to have. You hear an announcement, it sounds so great, and you think, oh, yeah, that's just the beginning. It's not the beginning. The beginning was a long time ago. And so I began to become skeptical. I also was following the startups, and my students certainly were. And I began to realize that some of the startups weren't profitable. And by 2018, I had collected a lot of data that said they weren't profitable. These unicorns weren't profitable. The number of unicorns that are profitable has gone up by a little over the last 5 years, but not by huge amounts. It's not
Hmm.
like all these unicorns are going to be profitable. I mean, unicorns are going out of business, being acquired, or going bankrupt much faster than they are doing IPOs and becoming
Right.
profitable. So to make a long story short, I've just taught myself to be skeptical, partly because I wasn't skeptical when I was young and I had to learn that. But I also learned that from working with a lot of companies and from learning from, what succeeded and what didn't. I've always been a voracious reader of histories of technology because I like to understand exactly what happened and the details of which products came out when and could do what. Uh, so that's kind of a long introduction.
It was an interesting thing that you put about the history repeating itself. One of the things that reminded me of what you're talking is, and you've seen it many times, is this chart that Gartner puts out, the technology consultants group, about the hype cycle, and how that the hype always leads by months or years what is actually the manifestation of the technology in a commercial way. And that leads me to, one of the pieces that you wrote in the American Affairs Journal on Web3 and the metaverse that was making the news in the last few years. And in that piece, you argued that these technologies lack practical, useful innovations. Love for you to talk a little bit about that. How do you differentiate between hype-driven tech trends and genuinely transformative innovations?
Well, I think that when you think about a technology, you have to connect all the technical details and the improvements in the performance and the performance and the improvements in the performance to actual applications. In the end, you have to think about people and how does this make people's lives better. So I mentioned that I've read a lot of history. Well, a lot of you read history of technology from a long time ago, and you read about water wheels enabling food to be processed faster, clothing to be made faster, lots and lots of things. These are things that people want, and so I have focused on that my entire life, and a lot of other people do too. But over the past 10 years, you see the conversation going off in weird directions. Recently I watched Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google, talk for an hour. And the only application he talked about was music and video. And he said, well, you can steal those from everybody. He didn't say anything else. He just said, well, I think it was arbitrary action, that somehow you just push the button and all these agents go out and do all these things for you. And he didn't talk about any good things. He didn't talk about, making products or harvesting crops or treating patients in hospitals. It was all just kind of technical details that he was talking about. And we see that in today's world. I don't know why. I think part of it comes from the fact that most of the most successful business over the last 20 years have been kind of outside of the things that most people think about, like food and clothing and appliances and housing and healthcare. They don't think, and transportation. Most of it has been in Google search, YouTube videos, social media. I mean, these things, they don't really strike at the core of what humans want, right? I mean, there's been a lot of discussion, so I don't need to say anymore. So I think that a lot of these tech leaders, they've gone off in this weird direction of, we know all this technology is really going to help humans, and so we're just going to focus on the technology and not try to say anything about how it helps humans. And what do we find if it doesn't help humans?
You make a great point. Even leaving aside things like food and transportation and the day-to-day necessities of life, even if you look purely at technology, one could argue that the very first smartphone was maybe a technological innovation, but the next iteration that is a bit smaller or a bit faster or has 1 megapixel more in the camera, is that really an innovation that is going to make a dramatic difference like the first one did?
Yeah.
I think you're talking about not just technologies that are going to make an impact in human life. Even if we narrow it further down and just talk about productivity increases at a time when productivity is not increasing, does more social media or a faster social media or a better interface on social media, does that have any impact on productivity gains for the workforce?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that it's not going to lead to improvements. And in fact, a lot of the efforts in those areas it'll increase engagement in things, but it's not really leading to people coming together to solve bigger problems. And I know that a lot of people will look at the stock market being so high and the technology is so great. And I say, well, what's going on right now in the election? Do you see happy people? It used to be that the Republicans were happy about the free market and about things were getting better. And the Democrats were unhappy about inequality and things. But now even the Republicans are angry, right? Most Trump supporters are angry. They want something really big change. So they're not happy. So really, you begin to wonder, well, it seems like more than 50% of the people are unhappy, are mad. It's only, top 10, 20% who seem to be happy about how things are going. So it's not just that the productivity figures, are poor. It's that people are telling us that their lives really aren't getting better, and despite having the record high stock market.
Well, let's go on to that point about the record high stock market. And this is germane to financial advisors. In a landscape filled with buzzwords, and we talked about overhyped tech solutions that may not improve the human condition, what strategies can financial advisors use to help their clients avoid getting caught up in the hype and instead focus on investments or innovations that can offer real sustainable value? This is the focus of your forthcoming book in October, Unicorns, Hypes, and Bubbles.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about your new book and what investors should be mindful of?
Well, first of all, I'm not a finance person. That's not my field. I mean, I have physics, engineering. So I'm not a finance person. So I went to a practitioner book, and all the practitioners said, you got to have a how-to book. Just tell us how you work with this company, and then you created this billion-dollar company. That's really successful. I said, well, that's the whole point. There's so few profitable startups. There isn't a lot of success. The productivity growth is slowing. The innovation is slowing. No, we want a how-to book. So I had to make it sound like I was telling people how to understand the stock market, which I do, but not in the traditional ways, right? I don't do that at all. And so I talk about new businesses, and I talk about the economics of them and why a lot of startups are losing money because they've chosen businesses that really aren't that great. And some of that builds from Robert Gordon's book, The Rise and Fall of American Growth. So he does a masterful job of talking about how all the innovations, 50 to 120 years ago made people's lives better.
Mhm.
And I talk about how, well, the ones we're talking about recently really haven't made people's lives better. They a little, it's not like they've increased the productivity so that we have
Right.
cheaper transportation or cheaper anything. It's a little more convenient. And so I'm highly critical. I call these low tech businesses. I mean, I say, well, this is very different from the startups of the past. Very different from the semiconductors and the computers and the computer software and the computer networking and the fiber optics that we had many years ago. Very science-based stuff that really was much better, and gave us great products and services, but also provided a lot of jobs, blue-collar jobs for people. And then the second half of the book is more about the technology-based startups. So there are a lot of startups that have tried to commercialize new technologies. Some of them I would say call science-based technologies, like DNA sequencing and things of this type. But the problem with a lot of these technologies is that when you look at what's happened over time, the rate of improvement in the new technology has been very slow. But despite that, the companies have all kind of aimed for the mass market, trying to have that iPhone moment when the product comes out and it's so great that everybody buys it. What they need to do is they need to find the niche. What I say, what people used to say in business schools, but now they don't say it. Find the first customer, the second customer, the third customer. Instead, business schools talk about general purpose technology. And when this happens, everything's going to change. Hey, to make it happen, you have to find the first customer, the second customer, the third customer. So who is that first customer? People who will pay a lot for it or will put up with low performance. You have to find those people, right? And if you're an investor, you have to be looking, well, are they finding customers that really like it? They're really going to pay for it to make them profitable. Are they dealing with a technology that has rapid improvements? And people aren't doing this. And I mean, AI is such a great example because people look and say, oh, it's just improving so fast. Look at all these new products that are coming out. They're all over the place. Yeah, but just because lots of new products come out doesn't mean they're getting better. I mean, the one area where I would see AI getting better is that the video quality, right? You say generative AI, and the video quality is getting better. But if you look at the important measures of performance, and by the way, I'm much more optimistic about generative AI for making advertisements, science fiction portions of movies, particularly science fiction movies where truth isn't so important, where you can have hallucinations. But, you get outside some of these applications, hallucinations are important. What is the frequency of hallucinations? Is it going down? Well, not really. This is one of the key measures of performance. So if you're trying to judge about a technology, whether it's going to really succeed, one of the key factors is it getting better? Figure out what the customer really wants. Is that getting better? Right, that's the key thing. And so I go through tons of these technologies, from delivery drones to VR to AR, on and on. It's my engineering and science background. And I think a lot of these people who are making decisions about stocks, they not only don't have any understanding of engineering and science, they just kind of ignore it all. They just kind of believe in these kind of general statements that tech leaders are making. I mean, I read an article recently where all these board members are making decisions about AI, and they're making decisions based on presentations from tech suppliers. Come on. Of course, the tech suppliers are going to exaggerate the benefits of their product. Haven't you ever heard the stories about used car salesmen? Right? It's the same thing going on here, right? You really have to ask these questions yourself. And so a lot of my book is saying, hey, you don't need the expert to tell you. You can do this yourself. All you got to do is think through this in a logical manner, look what's being announced, figure out whether there's improvements. And if there isn't, well, then it's a niche product for now. And then you got to figure out, well, what's the niche? So you can do this yourself.
Your point is bang on. I mean, just to use one example, I can't remember exactly when it was that Elon Musk announced that within 4 years, a self-driving car will drive from New York to LA. I think that 4 years has come and gone like 3 times, and we're no closer to that happening.
Yeah.
But to your point, the issue is also that people forget that technology at its core, if it's done right, it's something that should be a tool that can help human beings go about their lives, but it's not replacing judgment. And the example that I always use, and it may be too mundane, but it'd be interested in your opinion, is GPS is a great tool for the average driver. And most people don't have any more sense of direction. They'll just enter the coordinates into the GPS and go. So no one will gainsay that it's a great tool. Okay, but there's 2 points to that I found interesting. Number one, there's enough anecdotes every year of people wrongly following their GPS into a dry riverbed or something because they misread it. Second, I thought this was really, really interesting. This was that maybe around the year 2000, the U.S. Navy got rid of navigation out of the Naval College, teaching that as a course because we've got computers and GPS satellites. Until a few years ago, when they realized with the blackouts that the enemy could actually put out your GPS satellites, and you better, have people that learn how to navigate the old-fashioned way by stars. So the point I'm making is that tools are important. As you say, people can be equipped to ask, is this tool going to add value? But use a degree of skepticism to sit there and think that, is it really going to do what it says on the box? But more importantly, where and when do I use my judgment to know when to use that tool, what that tool says, and when to ignore it?
Yeah, I agree 100%. Context is important. You got to understand the context you're dealing with and the situation you're in. And I don't know how many business professors would tell me that I had too much context in my business slides. I said that's all it is. It's not theory. It's context. It's understanding the context. It's understand how your business is a little different from somebody else's, and how the technology applies. You can't just do theory. I mean, most business professors. I mean, I taught with these guys at National University of Singapore. They would just look through all the top academic papers and they would teach those theories. And of course, if you do that, you don't have any common sense, because all the common sense was taken out a long time ago. Nobody would publish a paper on common sense. Say, this isn't new. This isn't novel. We don't need to publish this. We already know this. And now what you have is you have a generation of professors who don't have any common sense. They don't know any common sense because those papers aren't published anymore. And as a society, we've kind of become this way. To be fair, you see, I was a nerd who didn't have common sense when I was a kid because I was a math whiz. And I learned all that math and did all that, and I didn't have a lot of common sense. And so I've kind of reversed myself and learned all that stuff and learned how important it is and learned how, there are people with common sense. You got to be asking people the right questions. And unfortunately, the tech bros, right, they go past all this. And a lot of people, he's so rich, he must be so smart. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or he succeeded in that business. They don't understand that every business is different, and people are smart in a different way. And you can't just assume that one guy was smart in one way, so he's smart in all these other ways, because that's not the way it works. Everybody's smart in a different way, and there's a lot of different skills needed in the world. And we've got this educational system that only favors one type of smartness. Well, that's a mistake, because there's a lot of different kinds of smartness, and we need a lot of different kinds of people. And we're dealing with new technologies. You got to be looking at asking a lot of different people questions, looking at it from a lot of different perspectives. You can't just be listening to the tech bros.
I agree 100%. It's skill in one area doesn't translate. Because you're a tech bro doesn't mean you're going to be a great politician leading a nation. To me, I think the idea that the types of problems that we're facing now as a society, I mean, whether it's climate change or other things, require multiple different types of skills and leadership and thoughts, and we should remember that. The one thing that you talked about, and I'd love to dive in a bit more, is this whole idea of overhype, particularly from the context of AI. But you talked about tech bros, you talk about the hype, you talk about people being aware of it. Why do we fall susceptible to it? Why is the stock market running ahead of itself? Why do these startups, and there's many that we've had over the last 5-10 years. I'm thinking Theranos, I'm thinking WeWork, that raised billions of dollars in venture capital from some of the smartest minds that are out there. Yet they were old-fashioned frauds or didn't work. Why do people repeatedly fall victim, even some of the brightest minds, to this hype, and not be able to sit there and say that the emperor has no clothes?
Well, people want to believe in something positive. They want to believe in a positive future. Particularly rich people, they want to believe it's positive. Things are going to get better, and so we're very prone to believe an optimistic story. A CEO asks a bunch of people for advice, and he or she, the CEO, is probably going to believe the person with the most optimistic message. Somebody says, "Well, I don't know about this technology. It will do kind of okay, but you got to think about these and this and this." And then somebody else says, "Man, this is going to really succeed. It's going to make so much money for this company. It's going to do this, this, and this, and this." The CEO says, "Yeah, I like this. I like this guy. I like this optimism. Yeah. This guy's this pessimism. I don't like that." We just fall for that so often. The CEO who's always been successful, probably because he or she is smart, but also because they probably got lucky, right? So they don't see through that, and it's unfortunate. It keeps happening. And with AI, we've had this story, and this story's been going on a long time. What was it? There was a play on robots back in the 19. So it's 100 years old now. This Czech guy, I forget, iRobot or something. And we've been hearing this story about put everybody out of work, and it keeps happening. And myself and my co-author Gary Smith, we've reviewed so many of these studies. They have all these fancy black boxes models that they use to judge how many people are going to lose their jobs from robots, and it focuses on because there's all this database on jobs and what tasks are in those jobs and what tasks can be done with a robot, what can't be done with a robot, what can be done with AI. They keep using these things and keep predicting so many people are being unemployed, and it's kind of useless, and Gary and I, we say, just go back and look at the first application and see, is there a first application? Okay. Is the technology getting better? Okay, how's that going to help us move from the first to second to the third? They never do that. They never do a practicality check. And you have people doing this. So we've got all these elites who are giving advice, and they keep giving the same advice that everything's going to be automated, right? Remember Rise of the Robots? Remember World Without Work? Two books that won the Financial Times Best Book of the Year. It keeps happening. And I realize I'm kind of going around your question because you're saying, well, why does this happen? But people want to believe this, and people have been hearing this about AI and robots, and they believe in the back of their mind that this is going to eventually happen. And you know what? It probably will. It's just that, is it going to happen now, or is it going to happen 100 years? And let me tell you one final story. Charles Babbage developed a mechanical computer in about 1870. You could have said, hey, look at that. He was right. Computers were right. But it took so long that his predictions were kind of meaningless. It was meaningless. I mean, if you'd invested in computers in 1870, obviously you would have lost all your money before they actually started succeeding in the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s, right? So it's hard. People have this in the back of their mind that it's going to happen, but they kind of don't try to think about, well, how fast might it happen? Let me think about a data point from 10 years ago, from 20 years ago, from 30, because that's what you have to do. You have to think about those data points. You can't just think about, oh my gosh, so there's an announcement by a university, they've done this, and my gosh, it's all just starting. No, wait. Compare that to the announcements that we're making 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago.
That's a great point.
I did my PhD on the economics of robots. I turned it in 1984. I made a lot of those very optimistic predictions. And so I've lived through this.
No, that's a great point. The Babbage example is a great one. And to say that it is not that diminishes innovation or discovery, but it required a couple of other contributing factors, catalyzing technologies that were able to make this a reality. The other example that comes to mind is, and we don't hear about it anymore, but what was it, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, this mapping the DNA, the human genome, was a huge project, and it got lots of headlines, and it was done at millions of dollars. And I'm oversimplifying the conclusion, but it is that, between us and a baboon, there isn't that much amount of difference in the DNA. But we certainly haven't been able to commercialize that in any meaningful way. Does that mean that it was not good research and innovation? No. But we probably need one or two more things that are going to happen over the next 10, 20 years, maybe behind the scenes, and it will take longer for all of that to come together in some sort of a meaningful way to create, commercially useful applications.
Yeah, I agree. And that's the big part of the book. The part four is on science and is basically it takes a long time for these things to happen. And so just because some venture capitalist told you that quantum computers are here and solid state batteries and all these other technologies that they spent money on, well, it probably isn't. It's probably a lot further away than they're saying.
I want to touch on one more thing before we wrap up, and it's bringing it back to the human side of things, particularly from financial advice, but almost everything. And you've covered things like radiology and everything else in some of your writings. I happen to believe the human aspect is irreplaceable. I think there is a judgment and the ability to deal with context and complexity. We don't have technology or AI or anything being able to do it. We're getting technology that is increasingly becoming a part of customer client interactions, whether it's chatbots or interactive voice response systems. How do you think somebody like a financial advisor who needs the efficiency that comes from an AI